Hello and welcome to Sound Like, where today we're going to be having another look at Supermassive Black Hole. So an awfully long time ago I did my Sound Like video for Supermassive Black Hole with my mono board. Now the sounds we're going to be looking at today are largely the same, but because of the stereo board, the sound is a lot more wider and more diverse. So stick around. Now the guitar I'm going to be using for this video is of course going to be my Kaoss Manson, for kind of obvious reasons with the Kaoss Pad. I'm sure that many of you don't have access to a guitar with an XY pad in at home, so the solo section itself is quite open to interpretation for you to make any sort of crazy sounds that you want. For demonstration purposes of that part of the song, I will be demonstrating the settings on the Kaoss Pad that I use for that section. If you don't have a Kaoss Pad at home, don't worry about it, you can still make any kind of crazy sound that you want. Now, as usual with my Sound Like videos, I'm going to be going from start to finish, analysing each particular section, telling you exactly what pedal I'm using, or combination of pedals, how to dial in those sounds, and demonstrating those sounds off for you. But before we get into the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to let you know when I upload new content. Now, let's get started. Okay, so to kick off the song, we have the opening riff. Now, in my previous Sound Like video, I was using my big muff pedal for that main riff sound. The justification for that was that it's a big, beefy, chunky tone, and that is still largely true now, but because of my stereo board, I can now blend in some additional sounds, and what I'm using is my prime distortion. Now that's being used as a counterpoint to what the big muff offers. It goes from big, chunky, rounded tone from the big muff to a more precise pinpoint sound that the prime distortion has. Put those two together and you get a well-rounded sound that has the best of both worlds. You've got the nice low bottom end from the big muff and the nice crisp sound from the prime distortion, and it sounds like this. So as you can hear there's a lot more diversity with the sounds that are going on. There's a lot more of a great blend of sounds. You've got the, obviously as I said, you've got the nice low end sounds and the nice more precise pinpoint sounds from the prime distortion and big muff. Overall, this sound in particular and this combination of pedals works really well for Supermassive Black Hole, its main riff, but also other riff-based guitar songs that Muse have. So don't be surprised if this sort of combination of pedals appears in future Sound Like videos. So there we have it. The opening riff is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. A great solid tone. As long as you can get a sound that works like that, you'll be good to go. As I previously mentioned in other Sound Like videos and when I was announcing this, the main sound that I would go for if I were you, and if you've only got one option to go for, you have not got a stereo setup, is still going to be the big muff. That's the overarching, the kind of the dominating sound there, the nice big chunky kind of low end that you've got going on there. The prime distortion, as I said, does have those higher frequencies, but it's not a must-have. That nice crisp pinpoint sound is good, but it's not the critical part of the sound. The big muff is still your best option. So moving away from the opening riff now to the verse sound. Now previously I was just using the overdrive distortion rolled all the way over to the overdrive sound. Absolutely no distortion sound in there at all. And again, the approach is largely the same, but the additional pedal I'm using is my blues pedal turned all the way up. Again, with the opening riff sound, these pedals are both being sent to left or right. They're not being combined in any way. So across my stereo field, you can hear clearly on one side is one sound and the other side is the other. With the overdrive distortion pedal tuned all the way over to the overdrive sound, it's a lot closer, sort of, to the sound that the blues pedal has got, but there's obviously some differences in there as well. That sort of close sound, but still with those differences in there, help to thicken out that overall overdriven sound. And it sounds like this. So as you can hear in there, it's very different from the opening riff sound, which is really good. You want a really good counterpoint to go from that big opening riff over to something different in the verse, then that helps launch you into the bigger chorus sound later on. One thing that's really important to me when developing new guitar sounds or when I'm writing music is to have these big counterpoints in my sounds, to go from something big to something small or vice versa. To have a really good change in dynamics is really good, and combining these two pedals to get a really nice thick sound with a lot of differences in the kind of frequency content in there, but overall sort of having the same sort of approach is a great way to get a good verse sound for Supermassive Black Hole. In terms of what I would use for a mono sound, is still going to be the overdrive distortion, again rolled all the way over to an overdrive sound. So the key thing for you to look at here is a good solid overdrive sound that has a good amount of bite in there with it. The use of the blues pedal in this section for me is just to get a nice different sound that really complements the main sound that I've got. That part is not the necessity, the overdrive is still the main thing to be looking out for here. So now we're going to be moving on to the chorus of Supermassive Black Hole, and this is without a doubt my favourite sound within the whole song that I use altogether. Now in the previous video I was using my Big Muff for the drive and the whammy for a harmony octave down for that faux synth sound that I really enjoy using. To add some extra diversity in there, I'm using the prime distortion the same as I'm doing with the opening riff to add those extra nice high frequencies in there to contrast against the low grumbly Big Muff sound in there. Now because the ESA gives me the opportunity to put one pedal either side, I have the ability to decide where the whammy is affecting the signal chain. I can put it first before the signal splits and affect both the prime distortion and the Big Muff. But what I've actually decided to do is put the whammy on the side with the prime distortion. This is because putting the whammy with the Big Muff doesn't overall do a lot to really thicken out that sound, because the sound is already quite rumbly and low-endy. The reason I put it with the prime distortion is that I can still get that nice crisp sound, but double it up and thicken it as well. And keeping the whammy away from the Big Muff helps to kind of really double down on that nice stereo spread sound. There is an argument to kind of keep it on the Big Muff, but I kind of resisted that temptation because I had that sort of sound previously with my mono rig, and this just gives me an opportunity to try something new. And I really like the result, and you might too, because this is what it sounds like. Since getting the ESA, this is kind of one of my favourite sounds to kind of really go for and get and achieve with my new setup. I have the ability to kind of really play around with the Big Muff. So this instance of the chorus kind of appears pretty much in every single appearance that it occurs in, apart from one which we'll get to when we cover the solo. So after the first chorus is done, we come out of that and go into another verse. Now this is actually slightly different from the previous verse sound that we have, because I go over to my main riff sound. And my argument for using my riff sound over my normal verse sound is because this part of the song is actually quite short, and I want to keep that energy and that momentum going. So that's the only kind of difference that's kind of really going on there. Personally, I could use that verse sound that I have, but I really like to keep the momentum and the energy going by using my main riff sound. And that part sounds like this. So the next sound that we're going to be analysing comes after the second chorus. Now what's going on in the song is that the main riff is played again. You might think that I would go over to my main riff sound, which I could do, but I don't. The sound I'm actually using is my prime distortion and my overdrive sound set to different sides of the stereo field and playing with that. Now the reason I'm using this combination of pedals is to have that difference, that differentiation from my main riff sound. You don't want to get too used to it, you don't want to get too comfortable with using that sound. It's still a great sound, but because we're kind of well into the song at this point, you want something new to lean towards. As I have said before, when I'm kind of building sounds for songs or when I'm writing my own music, I want to think about the longevity of the sounds that I'm using in my music, and at significant points in the song, I want to try a new sound. And this is the new sound for this part of the song. Now, of course, without using the big muff, we lose quite a lot of that nice grunty low end, but what we get in return is the nice kind of good chunky, still kind of high mids of the overdrive distortion. It obviously does not have the grit and the low mids of the big muff, but the mids that are provided by the overdrive distortion are still really good and help punch through the mix of the song, so that one, you can hear it, it sounds great, and it's a new sound to play around with. And it sounds like this. The other big thing to note for this part of the song is that it overall doesn't really last very long, so you want something that's really going to take notice for this particular part. It's not critical if you're kind of limited with the range of sounds that you've got. Your main riff sound will work, but if you have the ability for an additional sound for this particular part, then I would strongly suggest that you go for this sound. If you're limited with the range of sounds that you can have, of course your main riff sound will work just fine, but if you have the ability to get in a new sound, I would strongly suggest an approach to a sound like this. Overall, with this song in context, this is the only time where I'm actually using this sound. When I go back to the main riff, I'm using my main riff sound, because we're kind of come to the end of the song and the frequency range is kind of really cleared up, and it still works just as well. This helps to kind of give this particular part of the song its own identity. So now we've come to everyone's favourite part of Supermassive Black Hole if you're a guitarist, because we're now going to be doing the Kaoss Pad Solo. Before I show you what settings I'm using for the Kaoss Pad Solo, I'm going to tell you about what pedals I'm using first. Now with the ES8, I can split the channel, as you all know, so what I'm using is the overdrive distortion and the big muff. Now sometimes I can kind of really swap the overdrive distortion sound out with the blues pedal, which actually kind of has a decent enough amount of punch with it, but I still am more kind of drawn towards the overdrive distortion sound itself, just because it has a little bit more kind of broader sounds, and it's a bit more well-rounded, and it punches through just that little bit better. And on the other side, the big muff is being used for kind of obvious reasons. Both of these pedals are affecting the Kaoss Pad, they're obviously just affecting it differently, so when it comes to through to your ears, you are hearing the same input sound, the Kaoss Pad, but being affected differently, so it sounds a bit more spread out. To give you an idea about what's happening to the guitar signal before it hits the ES8 is that it comes out of my guitar, surprise, surprise, into my line selector switch. Now in one of the loops of the line selector, I have the Kaoss Pad, so it gives me the opportunity to effectively turn the Kaoss Pad signal on and off. So what I do for this particular part is turn the Kaoss Pad loop on to then be able to affect the signal. If you have the line selector pedal, you'll know that there is a lot of blending options for this. It doesn't really matter what kind of really you're going to be using for this, as long as you can get guitar signal into the Kaoss Pad and then get the Kaoss Pad sound out of it as well, because for one of the settings in particular, you do want to get that guitar signal through there. Previously, I was actually affecting the Kaoss Pad separately in its own channel, where I couldn't normally get signal into it. It would just be just the synth sounds from it. But since I've had the ES8 and I need to take both input slots on my audio interface, I've had to integrate my Kaoss Pad into my sound. But it's been really good to kind of get that sound in there as well, because I can then affect the guitar signal through the Kaoss Pad and get this kind of like nice broken up, almost breaking sound through the Kaoss Pad, helped even more by the pedals that I'm using. As for the settings I'm using on the Kaoss Pad, I'm going to show you them now. When I'm playing the solo for Supermassive Black Hole, I always stick with one sound. I do not flip between two different settings for the solo, because I'd rather just focus on playing the song itself rather than getting a bit too nerdy and a bit too into the kind of different sounds that I can really get. Now to demonstrate these sounds, well, there's only one way to do it, and here it is. as you can see, my approach for the Kaoss Pad Solo is twofold. First one is the harp version, where it's half with the Kaoss Pad and then half playing some guitar stuff. I believe the version that I played was the harp version that you hear, including the riff at the end. The other solo that I use is the more recent, the more modern sound that Matt's been using. There was a different sort of sound that he was using back a couple of years ago with more of a flanger effect. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, and I can't quite recreate that sound, particularly with what I've got, so I don't even try. Really, what I would like to do is come up with my own sound, but like many of you, I'm a bit more too drawn towards trying to recreate that sound because it's just really fun. But maybe one day I will be a bit braver to try something truly unique and truly new. And maybe if I do that, one day I will show it to you. So after the solo, I switch back over to my main riff sound. That's the sound with the prime distortion and my big muff, but without the whammy, and play the chorus notes, but within power chords, just to kind of add some extra thickness. And then halfway through that chorus, I then go back into the usual sound for it, play the chorus as normal. And overall, that's the song done in its entirety. After that chorus is done, I go back over to my main riff sound and play the riff or do some improv stuff, and then the song ends. So really, the song is done. Now let's just go and debrief. So there we have it, that Supermassive Black Hole remastered done in its entirety. I do hope you enjoyed this one, and that my new definition I do hope you enjoyed this one, and that me going through my new sound was both informative, enjoyable, and makes you want to develop your sound further. On a personal note, since having the Boss ES8 and being able to do it in a stereo sound, it's made playing and thinking about playing Supermassive Black Hole a lot more enjoyable for me, because there's more of a range of sounds and there is a lot more kind of diversity in the sounds that I'm using. Previously with my mono rig, it was fine, but it just didn't have something. Now with this sound, particularly with my chorus sound, which is a sound I really love, I really am excited to play it whenever I do, both in my live streams that I do, which you should check, follow me on Instagram for, by the way, cheeky plug, but you know, no one else is gonna plug me. But it just makes playing Muse songs like that in particular more exciting, and along with the other sounds that I use that sound for. I'm not going to tell you which ones they are, you'll just have to stick around, make sure you're subscribed, and wait for the next Soundlight video. But as always, I do hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you thought about this video down in the comments, and while you're there, maybe tell me about a song that you'd like me to do a Soundlight video for. It doesn't have to be Muse, but they seem to be the band that I want to do Soundlight videos for. But in the meantime, I've been Harry, and thanks for watching.